Hello, Indian mythology fans. My name is Sonika, and I am the author of the book Who God Really Is. Today, I bring you the story of how Lord Shiva's throat became the iconic deep blue color that we see featured in all of his images. This story is from the Shiva Purana, and it is quite a dramatic one. As always, after telling you the story, I will teach you the very useful lessons of this ancient Hindu myth that you can still apply to your modern emotional and romantic relationships and spiritual understanding in the 21st century. Now, Hinduism is sometimes called a complicated religion. It's why I wrote the book Who God Really Is, a book in which the principles of Hinduism are best understood and God is explained through a modern rational lens. Do grab your copy on Amazon today. Let me tell you the Hindu myth of how Shiva's throat turned deep blue now. 2 days ago, I recounted the famous Indian myth of the churning of the ocean, or Samudra Manthan, as it is known to many Hindus. It was a story of a monumental struggle between the demigods or devas and the demons or asuras to obtain the nectar of immortality. The devas were weakened and losing their power, while the asuras were growing stronger. Worried about their loss of power and balance in the universe, the demigods sought help from Lord Vishnu, the preserver of the universe. Lord Vishnu advised them to churn the cosmic ocean of milk so that Amrita, the nectar of immortality, could come forth from it. But God also advised them to work with the asuras, their eternal enemies, to churn this ocean due to the sheer strength and willpower that would be needed to accomplish the churning of this magnificent ocean. And that's exactly what the demigods did. They enlisted their eternal enemies, the asuras or demons, and the churning of the ocean took place as I described it to you in a previous podcast episode. The ocean was vast and deep, so the legendary serpent Vasuki, who is coiled around Lord Shiva's neck in every image that you see of him to this day, was chosen as the churning rope by the demigods and the demons. In fact, Lord Vishnu suggested using the great serpent Vasuki as the churning rope. Now, reluctantly, Vasuki agreed, and the demigods and demons took their positions as the churning of the cosmic ocean of milk began. The much wiser demigods quickly sought the tail of Vasuki, while the foolish demons or asuras grabbed the great serpent's head. They started pulling back and forth on the body of Vasuki, using it to churn the ocean with all their might. As they churned, many treasures and divine beings emerged from the depths, including the celestial cow, Kamadhenu, the wish-fulfilling tree, Kalpavriksha, the goddess of wealth, Mahalakshmi, and even the moon, known as Chandra. However, as Vasuki's body became taut from the pressure enacted on it through the churning, poison started to creep out from his fangs, a poison that held the power to utterly destroy all of creation. In other versions of the famous Hindu myth of the churning of the ocean, a deadly dark poison called Halahala emerged from the depths of the ocean itself. Nevertheless, a poison so potent that just its fumes could destroy all of creation emerged during the famous churning of the ocean. If you are enjoying this podcast, please leave a rating or review. I will really appreciate it. The moment Halahala emerged, it spread across the cosmos, burning everything in its path. The poison was so powerful that even the demigods and demons fled in terror. The plants withered, the waters became toxic, and the very air turned poisonous. Even Lord Vishnu and Lord Brahma could not stop its destructive force. When the demigods and sages turned to Lord Vishnu for help, God told them, "Only Shiva, the destroyer of evil, can handle this poison. If the poison were left unrestrained, it would annihilate all of existence." The demigods and sages prayed to Lord Shiva, the destroyer and supreme ascetic, the only being powerful enough to handle such a catastrophe. They pleaded, "Mahadev, only you can save the universe. Please consume this poison before it destroys everything." Lord Shiva, ever compassionate and selfless, agreed without hesitation. He knew that no one else could survive consuming such a powerful toxin. However, drinking it would mean certain death, even for him, if the poison spread throughout his body. Still, with his unmatched selflessness and courage, Lord Shiva scooped up the entire halahala into his hands and without fear drank it in one swift motion. As the poison traveled down his throat, it burned with an intensity beyond imagination. Goddess Parvati, Shiva's divine consort or wife, took notice of the pain in her husband's eyes and knew that she had to act fast. Without a second thought, Goddess Parvati placed her hand around Shiva's throat and pressed on it, preventing the poison from spreading further down his body. Her divine power stopped the poison in his throat, keeping it from reaching his heart and vital organs. The immense power of the poison turned Lord Shiva's throat deep blue, giving him the title Nilakanta. Even though the poison did not spread, its presence in his throat caused Lord Shiva unbearable pain. To cool him down, the gods of the Trinity and the demigods and sages offered Lord Shiva sacred water from the Ganga or Ganges river, which flows from his matted locks even in images of him to this day. They also gifted him the moon or Chandra, which sits atop his head and whose cool light and atmosphere helps to soothe the burning in his throat. With the threat neutralized, the demigods and demons resumed their churning. And if you listened to my Naked Hindu Tales podcast episode from 2 days ago, then you already know how the famous Indian myth of the churning of the ocean concluded. What is undeniably true is that Lord Shiva was indeed the greatest hero out of all the benevolent characters who are featured in this famous Hindu myth. He saved the universe by enduring unimaginable pain and personal transformation. Even today, Shiva's blue throat stands as a symbol of his selflessness, strength, and willingness to bear suffering for the good of the universe, for the good of his creation, us, his children. Devotees honor him as Nilakanta and always offer him milk and water to soothe his throat, just as the demigods and other Hindu Trinity gods did in the tale I just told you. So what are the fascinating lessons that we learn from this Hindu myth? For one, when we become so ambitious in our endeavors, in our goals, in the things we want, the things we expect, we have to be prepared for setbacks or quote-unquote poisons because they will appear. That's what the demons and the demigods were not prepared for. They were not prepared for the emergence of this poison, hala, during their churning of the ocean. They didn't even think about what would happen to the legendary serpent Vasuki's body with all the pushing and pulling, the tugging that they were going to be putting it through. They were agitating for the immortality, the nectar of immortality. This poison emerged amongst the many other blessings that came forth from the ocean. One of the morals of this famous Hindu myth is that when we are ambitious, we have to be prepared also for the poison that will confront us during our ambitious undertakings. Hinduism is a very realistic religion, and that is the way of the world. When we are ambitious even for goodness, we will be confronting poison or evil or chaotic beings in our path, in the path of even goodness. And that is something that God wants us in the modern 21st century to not forget, because in this day and age, we are all quite ambitious, but we are not always prepared for what our ambitious undertakings, our journeys will bring us. Let's be honest, we are all very ambitious for something, and so we must not forget what these ancient spiritual tales teach us. I'm reminded here of what I write in my book, What is God Good For? Evil, Karma, Sin, and Suffering, correctly explained finally. I write, "It is a shame that many parents and families do not embrace ancient holy stories from any God-centric religions. The descendants, just like their ancestors, are raised without serious studies of the nature of God and knowledge of the high positive value of some of these stories. It is vital for all parents of all backgrounds, atheists and non-atheists, to dedicate some time to acquiring the truthful knowledge of God so that they can teach their children how the worship of God will be useful to them should and when they develop emotional intellectual upheaval within themselves or mental health crises in the future. God is undeniably a necessary tool for preparedness for life on earth in the 21st and 22nd centuries and beyond. It is important that all parents present the truthful knowledge of God to their very young children as a self-protective and healing knowledge for them to rely on and remain anchored to as they grow and traverse the overly unstable earth experience." Do grab your copy of my book, What is God Good For? Evil, Karma, Sin, and Suffering, correctly explained finally on Amazon today. There's still so much value in the lessons that ancient Hindu myths try to get through to us. These ancient stories want us to pay attention to them. I hope that you continue to follow this podcast because I bring these lessons to your attention. These lessons can be easily lost due to the very complex and surreal nature of Indian mythology. They are still very much relevant to our ambitious and some might even say lost and irrational modern or postmodern world. The story of how Lord Shiva's throat became blue mirrors the way we as humans develop certain mindset programs that shape our personal relationships. Just like Shiva, who took in the poison to protect the universe, many of us absorb emotional pain, childhood conditioning, and societal expectations from others and allow them to dictate how we interact with new and familiar faces throughout our lives. Often we try to save others before we are saved ourselves. Poison, particularly in the form of emotion porn, is all around us, as I discuss in my book, Who God Really Is. I write in my book that the ungodly world, which often encompasses even the religious world, wants us to be consumed by emotion, the emotions, the pain, the pleasure, the highs and lows of so many other living beings constantly. Often these beings are complete strangers to us who are sharing their pains and pleasures, highs and lows with us on social media constantly or consistently. The ungodly world wants us to pay them heavy attention. And when we do, when we fall into that trap, we cause ourselves to lose sight of our own depths and selves. The world is swamped by emotion porn, so to speak. To understand yourself, the traps and trappings of this world better, do grab your copy of my book, Who God Really Is, on Amazon today. If we are not mindful, the unprocessed poisons of past experiences, insecurities, and fears can seep into our relationships, causing conflict, misunderstandings, and emotional distress. However, Lord Shiva's response in this Hindu myth teaches an important lesson. Rather than letting the poison spread, he contains it in one place. This is similar to how advanced emotional intelligence allows us to acknowledge past and present wounds without letting them dictate our interactions. In my book, Who God Really Is, I teach readers how to accomplish this advanced emotional intelligence and what it really looks like as it manifests and is deployed. Instead of projecting our pain onto loved ones, we can hold it consciously, reflect on it, and prevent it from poisoning our relationships and future. Just as Parvati places her hand on Shiva's throat to stop the poison from harming her husband, self-awareness, therapy, and inner work help us regulate our emotional responses. Goddess Parvati, of course, is the divine light that many New Age spirituality groups reference without even knowing her as I know her and discuss her in my book, Who God Really Is. She is the intelligence I write about in my book. So, of course, it would be Goddess Parvati who would prevent complete destruction or self-destruction within a selfless act and being. In this story, it was Shiva who was that selfless being. There is a profound spiritual understanding in all of this interplay between Shiva and Parvati in this Hindu story of how Lord Shiva's throat turned blue. It is an understanding that I discuss throughout my book, Who God Really Is. We must remember through the example of Goddess Parvati's actions that by choosing to respond with wisdom instead of reacting from pain and shock, we cultivate healthier connections and break cycles of emotional toxicity. Goddess Parvati did not react with emotional distress and shock when she saw that her husband was self-destructing. Rather, she responded with self-control and wisdom. Goddess Parvati, in fact, brought self-control to her husband, or the great Lord Shiva, in this story of the churning of the ocean. Another important lesson for us to keep in mind is that though Lord Shiva's act of drinking the poison was a selfless decision, he did not allow it to consume him. In relationships, we often take on emotional burdens for others, whether in the form of unhealed trauma, people-pleasing, or unhealthy attachments. But true love and wisdom lie in balance, absorbing only what we can handle while ensuring our own well-being. Just as Shiva relied on the cooling effects of the Ganges River and the moon to soothe his throat, we too need self-care, support systems, and healthy boundaries to process our emotions and accomplish our day-to-day responsibilities. Finally, it's fascinating that the poison was held in Lord Shiva's throat. Often it is from our throat chakras, from the way we communicate, that we can, decide if we are going to poison our relationships with others, if we are going to permanently disable those relationships, or if we are going to keep them, in our lives, if we are going to keep those relationships intact. So, another important lesson we learn from the symbolism of this story is that we must be very careful about the way we communicate with others, because it is how we communicate, our throat, that holds that power to either prolong our relationships in a healthy way or to poison them. Our throat holds both the potential for poison and the potential for compassion and care. If you have found it somewhat difficult to understand God well through the often complex Hindu stories, then do read my book, Who God Really Is, on Amazon. It is a book in which the principles of Hinduism are best understood and God is explained through a modern rational lens. Thank you for listening, and I'll speak with you in the next episode.